Diabetes Connections is brought to you by the only ultra-rapid-acting inhaled insulin, by Omnipod, simplify life with Omnipod 5, and by Dexcom. Manage diabetes confidently and achieve real results with Dexcom G7, the powerfully simple CGM.
This is Diabetes Connections with Stacey Sims.
This week, actress Jennifer Stone lives with LADA. She decided to become a nurse and started her first ER job in March of 2020. I asked her what it was like knowing she had to take care of her own diabetes while also taking care of patients during a pandemic.
Because it's kind of that air mask metaphor, right? Like if I don't put on my air mask, I can't put on the person next to me. And then you have two passed out people. Yeah. And sometimes in the ER, you literally have two passed out people. And also to asking for help. I think that's a big thing with diabetics as well. I know for me, like I had the hardest time asking people for help because I wanted to show that I could do it by myself, but you can't.
You might know Jennifer best from her days on Disney's Wizards of Waverly Place. I caught up with her to talk about how she manages LADA, why she decided to become a nurse and still continue acting, and what's next for her dual careers. This podcast is not intended as medical advice. If you have those kinds of questions, please contact your healthcare provider. Welcome to another week of the show. You know we aim to educate and inspire about diabetes with a focus on people who use insulin. I'm your host, Stacey Sims. My son was diagnosed with type 1 right before he turned 2. He is now 18. My husband lives with type 2 diabetes. I don't have any kind of diabetes. I have a background in broadcasting, and that is how you get the podcast. We've talked about LADA quite a bit here on the show, that is latent autoimmune diabetes in adults. I will link up more in the show notes because it is one of the most misunderstood forms of diabetes. I think everybody who's come on the show with LADA has told a story about being misdiagnosed first, either with type 2 diabetes or something else entirely. And the type 2 diabetes diagnosis is what happened to Jennifer Stone. She was diagnosed in 2013, so she's lived with it for 10 years now. And I last spoke to her in 2018. I had to go back and check the notes. It has been 5 years. I'm glad to have her back. A lot has changed for her during that time. As an actress, she is probably best known for her role as Harper Finkel, Selena Gomez's character's best friend on Wizards of Waverly Place. As I told her when we spoke in 2018, this was one of my kids' favorite shows growing up, and Harper Finkel, for so many reasons, was our favorite character, especially for my daughter, who was really excited I was talking to Jennifer again and asked to say hi and all that. My daughter is almost 22 years old now, and I miss watching these kinds of shows with them. We were not alone in really enjoying that show. Obviously, it was a big hit at the time, and Jennifer now hosts a new podcast called Wizards of Waverly Pod with another one of the actors from the show, David DeLuise, and we talk a little bit about that as well. Couple of quick notes. This was taped in person at the American Diabetes Association Scientific Sessions. We are in the press room there. No sound issues whatsoever. I think it sounds great, but it might just sound a little different than the episodes week to week. Jennifer Stone is partnering with Medtronic. It is always good to mention that, just in the interest of full disclosure. It was really nice, though, to have the chance to talk to somebody who uses the InPen system. We haven't talked about that in a while, and I will also include more information on that in the show notes. And finally, this interview was taped at the end of June when the WGA, the Writers Guild, was already on strike, but the actors were not. So since that time, and SAG-AFTRA, those actors have gone on strike now. Jennifer is in that union. She has joined the strike. I don't know what that means for any of the comments she might have made about her podcast, but certainly she's putting a hold on any of the acting that we talked about. That interview up next. How many times have you miscalculated timing of a mealtime insulin dose? This happens to us a lot. Benny will dose after he orders, and then the restaurant gets busy. The meal takes longer than expected, or, he'll just forget, or a bowl is too late. That's very often happens. And then you have to deal with high blood sugars. If that happens to you, it might be time to think about Afrezza inhaled insulin. Afrezza uses a breath-powered inhaler to quickly deliver insulin powder into the lungs and bloodstream. It's fast in, fast out. In fact, with Afrezza, insulin is released into the bloodstream in less than 1 minute and may start to lower blood sugar in about 12 minutes. Ask your doctor if Afrezza is right for you. Go to diabetes-connections.com and click on the Afrezza logo. Afrezza can cause serious side effects, including sudden lung problems and low potassium, and is not for patients with chronic lung disease such as asthma or COPD, or for patients allergic to insulin. Tell your doctor if you ever smoked, have ever had kidney or liver problems, a history of lung cancer, or if you're pregnant or breastfeeding. Most common side effects are low blood sugar, cough, and sore throat. Severe low blood sugar can be fatal. Do not replace long-acting insulin with Afrezza. Afrezza is not for use to treat diabetic ketoacidosis. Please see full prescribing information, including boxed warning, medication guide, and instructions for use on afrezza.com/safety. Jennifer, thank you so much for joining me.
Of course, Stacey. I'm so excited to see you again. It has been, the world has changed since I saw you last.
Oh my gosh, just a little bit, just a little bit. And you've changed a lot in what you've been doing.
Yeah.
So much to talk about, but if you don't mind, let's just start with your diabetes management, because I think when we last spoke, which was 5 years ago.
Yeah, 2018.
You had recently started talking about living with diabetes. How's it going?
I feel like with every year, it's like getting older, right? You start to get a little bit of better understanding of like a better handle on it. Granted, of course, you know how diabetes is. You get a handle on it and then it all changes again. But lately, I've been working with the Medtronic InPen and really like honing in how it works with exercise and diet. That's been the latest thing that I've really been focusing on that has made a huge difference for me, is finding the right way to sort of bolus at the right time with the right dose and to really make sure that like the right exercises that work for me. Like for me personally, like for whatever reason, I think it's due to like the resistance, but like spin class, most of my like diabetic friends go low. I go high for whatever reason. So Pilates I've found is like my thing that like is my diabetes sweet spot with my sugars, where I can do diabetes and I don't go too high, but it's the strength training that I need. And then finding like the foods that go with that too, as far as like protein and macros. And so that's been kind of the fine tuning I'm doing lately.
You live with LADA, right?
Yeah.
Still? Okay. And we talk about that a lot. My listeners are very familiar with LADA. And I'm just curious, not everyone who lives with LADA needs to start on insulin right away. Do you mind sharing when you did?
I had about 4 years because I was diagnosed. I started the process at age 20, but it took about 4 years to be diagnosed correctly because I saw a lot of I was amazed. And as a healthcare provider myself now, I was amazed at how many people were behind on continuing education, which is vital for anyone in healthcare, because so many people were thrown because I was older.
Right.
So a lot of people thought it was type 2, and so they were trying to just give me oral anti-diabetics. A lot of people went to type 1, and I kind of have to, with LADA, a lot of times there's overlap because that honeymoon period is so variable. Like most of the time with like, you talk about it on your show, but for those who don't know, it's latent autoimmune diabetes in adults. And it can some people believe that it eventually does turn into type 1 because it is autoimmune and, those antibodies do eat the beta cells. And so typically it's around 30 to 35, but it's also often misdiagnosed. And so with LADA, you kind of have to meet in the middle sometimes with type 2 and type 1 management because of that honeymoon period that's variable with every patient.
Right.
And that was me. I had to be on oral anti-diabetics and insulin right away. So in that 4-year period, it was really hard. I got to the point where I was almost on dialysis because people were taking me off medication that I needed because it really helped pair with like insulin sensitivity. So with the endo that I have now, she understands how that's working, which sadly, my honeymoon period was very short-lived. I didn't get many years out of it. I think the last time I did testing on what beta cells I have left, it's like next to nothing. So I'm virtually a full-fledged type 1 now, but it was nice while it lasted.
Yeah, it's hard. I mean, everybody I know with LADA has a similar experience. They're all different, but of people not understanding in the beginning.
Sadly, it's a struggle to find healthcare providers who are up to date on, just like I said, that continuing education. And that was something that really inspired me to get into healthcare, was the fact that I was like, okay, to have this little understanding of something that affects so many people. I mean, I've seen in my short period of time going into healthcare, I mean, I think when we last spoke, I was still in school. It's been amazing to see people of all different ages. I mean, I see people who were 20 like me all the way up to 65 getting diagnosed with LADA or, type 1 or type 1.5, however you want to look at it. And it's truly astounding how some people are kind of stuck in, when they finish school, their mindset of that box of what type 1, type 2 looks like. And just like our knowledge is constantly changing, healthcare providers and their approach has to change with it.
How has it been being a healthcare provider these last couple of years? You went in at a time when who knew COVID and everything was going to be happening, but you were in school and then in practice.
Yeah. I mean, it was baptism by fire. I'm not going to I'm not going to lie. I mean, I graduated December 2019, and then I went to work in the ER in March of 2020.
Wow.
So all my friends were like, okay, how are we going to hunker down and isolate? And I was like, well, I'm going straight into it next week. Like literally the Safer at Home was announced in LA the week before I went to work for the first time. It was a lot. It was the learning curve of the difference between what you learn in school versus what you learn on the job, which I think no matter what your profession is vastly different. There's so many things you learn on the job that you can never be taught, with the added thing of the uncertainty of a pandemic that nobody knew how to handle. Mm-hmm. And so there's some things that I think just as healthcare providers in general, I think we're all still recovering from, to be perfectly honest, from a mental health aspect, from just like a knowledge aspect, myself included. But I'm a big believer that, you know, you're placed in certain positions for a reason. And so I think that timing isn't an accident. It's too crazy. It's too crazy of timing that I graduated right then and went into ER nursing at that time. And so I'm looking at the things that I've learned and the resilience that it gave me and the strength that I derived from it, because it definitely wasn't an easy time, but it's made me such a stronger, more resilient person, and I hope a better nurse.
I can't even imagine starting at that time. That's like, you know, being a reporter and being thrown in, you know, to something incredible. You have mentioned that you use InPen. Mm-hmm. And I'm curious, you know, this is a time where CGM and pump technology has moved so quickly. Yeah. The automated insulin delivery systems are state of the art. Why are you staying with InPen?
You know, for me, like it fits my lifestyle a lot better. Like I've used pumps in the past and I love the automated like part of it, but I don't stop. I don't know how to stop. I'm really bad about like, I stop to maybe like take a micro nap and then I'm back to whatever I'm doing. But between, you know, nursing, acting, auditions, you know, doing the Wizards podcast, and like, I don't know how to take a break. And that feeling of being untethered is why I love the InPen so much. It helps me do like the right dose at the right time. It gives me reminders when my brain is in a million different places to have that like, hey, we need to take some insulin right now. And also when I sit down to eat, when I can actually like carve out like 15 minutes to shove some food in my mouth, to not have to sit and like carry the decimal and like do math, which I never want to do. So to actually just be able to estimate, there's a lot of different approaches in the InPen app that you can either carb count or you can do meal estimation, which is how I choose to do it. So I can look at it and go, okay, I'm having a salad. That's going to be a small. Like that's a small meal. I'm not going to do like high carb count on that. Or I'm having a slice of pizza because it's for nurses. They know we're given pizza. Oh, we're understaffed. Have a pizza. Like that's how it goes, right? So like, yeah, that would be a large, like, so it's very easy for me to just quickly, it's a very accessible app that I can then bolus super quickly, keep it in my little like nursing fanny pack or my back pocket, whip it out, use it, and then get back to whatever I'm racing between.
I'm a little confused and maybe I shouldn't be, but I didn't realize that system, you don't have to do exact carb counts. You said it was like meal announcements.
Well, you have the option.
Oh, okay.
You have the option. So some people really like to do carb counting. God bless them. I'm not one of those people. But yeah, so some people really like to do carb counting. You can choose to do that option, or you can do meal estimation. And that's what's great about like, because I think most people think of MDIs as this more manual approach. And the InPen is unique in the fact that it's smart pen technology with an app. So we think about like smartphones and how like intelligent those apps are. So the app not only like reminds you with alerts of like, hey, it's time to take your insulin. Hey, it's time to check your, you know, blood sugar, however you want to set up those with you and your endo. It can be very personalized in that sense, with also too, whichever your meal preference, whether you want to count carbs or meal estimate. So you have both options kind of. So it feels like to me sort of like an untethered pump option, but it doesn't have like the continuous, obviously, like injection. Like you do have to still be cognizant to inject yourself. That's the difference there. But it has the same intelligence.
Yeah, I think whatever system you use, unfortunately, you can't set anything. You set it and forget it. Just doesn't exist.
I know.
You know?
I think we're heading there, though. I hope
so.
You know, I'm hearing a lot. You know, because we're here at ADA and 2023 in San Diego, and I'm hearing a lot about like the 7080G system, and I'm kind of having like FOMO a little bit. Like it's been years since I've used a pump, and like hearing how like automated and like a lot of like the users are talking about how like they kind of set it and forget it somewhat more than they ever have been. And like I said, I'm getting a little bit of FOMO.
I know. It's amazing. We could talk about the AID technology and some of the algorithms that are coming. It's incredible.
I'm excited about where we're going.
Yeah. Definitely. Especially because I have an 18-year-old who's a wonderful kid, but he forgets occasionally.
Yeah, as most 18-year-olds
the
do.
meals and the boluses and things, but it's really, really nice to know the systems really have their back in that way. You mentioned already your podcast.
Yeah.
I know you're not here necessarily to talk about all that, but as you know from last time, I'm a huge fan of the show. My kids loved it, and we all watched it when they were growing up. How much fun to do the podcast? How did that come about?
It was kind of like a lot of things in my life have been just kind of a wonderful, unexpected surprise. So Podco is the company that does the Wizards Waverly pod. And Christy Carlson Romano, who's on Even Stevens, her and her husband, Brendan Rooney, originated Podco. And I'd worked with them on like some of her YouTube stuff, and she did a lot of like nostalgia sort of throwback things right before the pandemic. And then they came to me and they were like, would you want to do a rewatch podcast? And I'm like, yeah. Like it's been, I think it's so special to kind of go back after you've had some time to really reflect and live life and explore other sides of yourself, to then go back to such a special time in your life, which Wizards, we were really lucky, was such a universally kind of special time. I think it's rare in your life that you have something that everyone kind of agrees upon was sort of like its own unique special thing. But I did tell him, I was like, I don't want to do it by myself. Because I was like, the idea of sitting behind a mic, I don't know how you do it, because the idea of like sitting behind a mic by myself, I was like, I'm like, don't know. It's too much me. So the first person I thought of who just makes me smile is David DeLuise. He always makes me laugh. Like he's just such a kind heart. I know we're not the most like obvious choice of the two people out of the show, but I think I knew that we have this dynamic. We even had it back then where he's kind of this big kid and I'm this little old lady. And so we kind of balance each other out really well. So he was the first person that came to my mind that I just was,
I really enjoy it. I think it works great.
Oh, I'm so glad.
It's so much fun.
I'm hoping it'll be like a nice fan experience and a good companion piece to people who are still watching the show as like a comfort.
And you've already mentioned you're working as a nurse and you're working as an actor. Yeah. Are you really doing both?
Yeah. Somebody told me the other day that, you can only serve one master at a time, which I get. I can totally see there's definitely times in my life where I'm like, okay, nursing has the spotlight or acting has the spotlight. Like there's times where they one of them will take a backseat because they have to. Yeah. Like during the pandemic, obviously nursing had the spotlight. And it worked because acting was kind of at a standstill. Everything was. But there's times in my life where I just have to really allow things to sort of take a back seat and try to figure out the best way to position things to where they can kind of coexist. But it can be challenging.
With nursing, I mean, there are some professions that, I don't want to say they're easier with diabetes because nothing is easy with diabetes, but there are some professions that perhaps are more of a routine.
More conducive.
Yeah.
I think, yeah.
I mean, can you talk a little bit about what it is like to be in an ER and have to take care of yourself? Well, it used to be that you would have to choose between an automated insulin delivery system and the freedom of a tubeless device. Now with Omnipod 5, you can have the best of both worlds, all in one. Omnipod 5 adapts with every pod change to meet your unique insulin needs and adjusts insulin using a customized target glucose, not a range. If you're ready to ditch the multiple daily injections or send your tubed pump packing, there's never been a better time. They'll even check your insurance coverage for you. Fill out the quick online form, see if you're eligible for a free trial. Just go to diabetes-connections.com, click on the Omnipod logo. For full safety, risk information, and free trial terms and conditions, visit omnipod.com/diabetesconnections. Right back to Jennifer now, answering my question about her experience managing her own diabetes in a busy emergency room.
It's been a good learning experience because I am just in my life. I'm always that person that I want to make sure everybody else is okay and then I'll take care of myself. And I think often people that are attracted to healthcare and get into that have that personality type. So it's been something where I've learned out of trial and error and out of necessity that, like, you know what? In most cases, not all of them, there are some that are a lot more timely, but in most cases with patients, taking an extra 5 minutes just to make sure that I'm taking, my insulin or I'm eating something is okay, because it's kind of that air mask metaphor, right? Like if I don't put on my air mask, I can't put put on the person next to me. And then you have two passed out people. And sometimes in the ER, you literally have two passed out people. So, and also too, asking for help. I think that's a big thing with diabetics as well. I know for me, like I had the hardest time asking people for help because I wanted to show that I could do it by myself, but you can't. And whether it's diabetes or anything in life, nobody does anything alone. And with nursing, it's impossible to do by yourself. It is truly a team effort. And I think that's what attracted me to it as well, among many other things, is like acting is a collaboration and nursing is too. And so I will tell my fellow like nurses that I'm like, look, I'm running low. Can you just like run in and like medicate bed 4 or whatever? You know what I mean? So it's just like knowing when to ask for help and what my limits are. That's been a big like learning lesson for me.
This is a little personal again, so pass is fine. I was talking with a friend of mine who's a diabetes psychologist, and we were talking about how difficult it must be when you have LADA and you kind of start out up here. And it's not necessarily easy, right? As we said already, diabetes is not easy, but you are more in range. You're controlled perhaps without medication, things like that. And then you find yourself needing more, you have diabetes more. Yeah. And he says he sees a lot of people who see that as a big failure. And it's very difficult. Did that happen to you at all? I mean, how do you get through something like that?
Oh, yeah. I mean, to be perfectly blunt, I used to be a perfectionist and I used to have an eating disorder when I was younger. So I, like on twofold, like of just like kind of that shame of like failure. Yeah. You know what I mean? So like that's also another reason I don't love carb counting, because it just kind of like triggers that part of my brain that I want to leave in the past. It's just not very effective for me. But with the perfectionism too, that shame monster is always there, and I have to put it in its place. And what I hate, and I was talking to somebody about this earlier today, about how we have to change the culture in healthcare, and especially with diabetes or with chronic illnesses in general, where we have to have like the patient, and take it with a grain of salt, these percentages, but like we have to expect 50% from the patient and then 50% from the treatment. You know what I mean? Because I think a lot of times, I think we're kind of at an 80-20 rule right now where the patient's expected to do 80-90% of it, and then we're expecting the medication or the technology to do 20-10%, right? And then when whatever the treatment is doesn't meet the patient in the middle, we're blaming the patient. And then that breeds that sense of shame, which we're already coming to the table with that. Like I know times I've gone to my endocrinologist and I've been so, like, I know my numbers are not great and I know that my A1C is not going to be good, and I'm already coming with like a sense of shame, and it shouldn't be like that, because as long as you're trying your best and giving it's a question of like, okay, you're doing your part, you're doing your 50% as the patient, where can we meet you in the middle? Yeah. And that's something that I have to say, like working with Medtronic, I've been really excited to see, is that excitement and that want to meet us in the middle as patients. And that's something too where it's like, you know, for me personally, I'm working on that. And I've made a lot of strides of realizing that, and diabetes has helped me a lot, of knowing that perfection is impossible, and that's okay. And it's actually more interesting as a human being to not be perfect.
Well, that's a totally different podcast to continue talking about growing up on television and everything you must have gone through. Yeah. But I really appreciate you being so open and sharing that. It is that shame in diabetes just goes hand in hand. It's terrible. So I really appreciate that. Before I let you go, Wizards of Waverly Pod. I haven't listened to every episode, but
you kind of have a lot going on.
No, I love it. It makes me laugh, and it brings me. My kids are, they've both graduated high school and college, so it brings me back to a really fun time.
Oh, good. Okay.
Are you going to have more guest stars? Like, what are we going to see? Selena Gomez dropping by, and everybody else who grew up on the show.
Selena Kate, she was on an episode.
I missed it.
Oh, you missed it. She was on pretty early on. Okay. I think we had her on like episode 4. So
see, I'm going backwards.
Yeah. Okay. So she's been on. So you'll get there. So if she was on episode 4 and you're going backwards, you've got a ways to go, because I think we just came out with like episode 30.
I listened to them that had mental health. There were questions, and then there were a few more I was listening. It just made me laugh. I think I did listen to the first one, and then I went ahead.
But no, we're going to have a lot more guest stars. We're going in between having, because we're on the first season, right? And we're going in between having some of like the main guest cast, and then also having a lot of the guest stars that even if they came on in just like one episode, getting to like go back and hear like their experience, what they can remember from that long ago, and talking about like the episodes with them and what that experience was. And like we talked to Haley Kyoko, who was on in later seasons as Stevie, Alex's like best friend, sort of like antagonist character. Right. And just her talking about sort of coming into our show when we were already established in her experience, and especially when she was newer to television. Just getting to hear people's experiences has been so great because we didn't necessarily have those conversations at the time.
Yeah. It's great to see you here at ADA. I know you've been part of the diabetes community and people, you're very open on Instagram and social media and stuff. Are you still finding that people are interested? They want to hear more from you? You're interacting with folks with diabetes?
I'm still amazed so many people don't know I have it.
Oh, really?
And I'm like, I feel like I'm really open and honest about it. I'm a big proponent of not being defined by it. I like to represent diabetes as something that's a part of my life, not who I am. It doesn't define me. And I think it's important to show that because I think a lot of times, especially when I was first diagnosed, people acted like it was going to be this thing that was going to be like this big red D that I wore on my chest for the rest of my life, which now I look back on, I'm like, that's ridiculous. And like all the things that they tell you can't do. And I want to be a proponent of like all the things you can do. So when people are like, oh, she quit acting to become a nurse, I'm like, no, I'm crazy. I'm doing both. And also I'm like, I have this condition on top of it that I manage. And you know, and with devices like the InPen, I'm able to. And so that's the thing is like, I really want to be a proponent of not like wearing the big D on my chest. But I do want people to know that it's like diabetes doesn't limit you at all. Like you can do maybe a little too much sometimes, but you can do whatever you want to. You know what I mean? Whatever your passions are, go explore them, go do them. You know what I mean? And diabetes is not something that's going to keep you from that.
Well, thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate talking to you.
It's so good to see you again. Hopefully I don't see you in another 5 years. Hopefully it's a little sooner than that.
You're listening to Diabetes Connections with Stacey Sims.
More information about LADA and the InPen system and Jennifer's podcast, all at diabetes-connections.com. You will see there every episode has its own homepage, so the show notes are in that. If you can't find what you're looking for, this episode will be right in the front. But if you want to go back and find our previous episodes, there is a very robust search. You can just go to the upper right search box and enter any keyword, LADA, Disney, ADA, all the episodes featuring that will pop up for you. Very simple. And with 580 episodes, we've got a lot for you to search through. All right, up next, just in case anybody thought the insulin pricing problem was solved now that the insulin companies say they have lowered the price, a good example of how we are all still getting the short end of the stick. Yeah, I got a story for you up next. I've been talking about integration for years, and it is wonderful to see it all happening. Dexcom G6 is part of Tandem Diabetes Control IQ system and part of the Omnipod 5 system. Benny has been using Control IQ for 3.5 years. The systems are amazing. Everybody sleeps better, and then the system has his back when he doesn't get the meal bolus exactly right or he forgets. As a mom, I'll never stop worrying, but I worry a lot less. And we all just think about diabetes less, which is really amazing. Learn more, go to diabetes-connections.com and click on the Dexcom logo. When Benny goes to sleepaway camp, we always have adventures to report, and you will hear his side of these stories when he comes on the podcast next. I mentioned that he had busted his pump earlier in the summer, thanks to the fabulous folks at Type 1 Tactical. He's got a great, robust case, a strong case, and knock on wood, so far so good going forward. I hope the same continues. But of course, never a dull moment with this kid. You know, when we pack him for these long times away, we really do our best to figure out how much insulin he's going to need. And I wrote about this in the second book, actually, how we calculate this. You just take the total daily dose of insulin, and you can find that in your insulin pump, or if you're keeping track, MDI another way. But you need your total daily dose, and then you multiply it by the days you need it. And then you figure out how many vials or pens you need. And then, if you're like most of us, you add on top of that. So he will be away for a total of 9 weeks this summer between the lifeguard training he needed, the staff training, and the actual camp. So we packed him with a lot of stuff. He texted me last week and said that he was concerned he was going to run out of insulin. As you're listening to this, he'll be home within 10 days. And for the amount that he had, he thought he could make it, but he didn't want to take a chance. And I appreciate that so much. And I am so glad that he let me know that he needed insulin before he was out of insulin. This is not a Benny looks bad story. I know I tell a lot of those, but he did everything right here. No problem. He's in Georgia. There's a CVS not that far away. So I said to him, I'm going to check and see what we have because, of course, We had just filled the 30-day prescription here at our local pharmacy. So I couldn't just send that regular prescription to the CVS in Georgia. Our insurance, there's no way they would cover that. But like a lot of pump users, we have a backup pen prescription. So that 30-day I just talked about was for vials. But our endo very smartly and wonderfully years ago wrote us a pen prescription that our insurance covers as a backup. So I don't fill that every single month, but I fill it regularly to kind of keep it going, right? So I will have a legitimate backup. And we use pens all the time. Benny finds them, much easier to carry, and they're great in case you do have a pump issue. You can just take an injection. So that's nothing new. I called our local CVS just to confirm how many pens would it get him to the end of camp. It certainly would. Was it covered by our insurance? Absolutely. So he found the closest CVS, and he said he's going to do it. I love this. He's 18. He's trying to do as much as he can himself. These are great learning experiences. Fantastic. He texts me a little while later and says, our insurance will not cover this. I don't know. It's not making any sense. It sounds like it's some kind of out-of-state thing. What? So I said, no problem. I'll call the pharmacy. Call the pharmacy. It indeed is some kind of weird out-of-state issue. I'm not going to go into too many details of our insurance, but it actually made sense, even though it was infuriating. And we might have to get some special dispensation, and there were going to be a lot of hoops. And then she said to me, let me run it with a coupon and see what the price would be without insurance. And I'm like, all right, lady, this is going to be some number, right? And she comes back on, and I could tell she thought it was the wrong number. $1,700 for 1 month of insulin pens. None of you are shocked, right? There's nobody listening who said, oh, I thought that number without insurance was going to be $35, Stacey, because Lily said it lowered the price of Humalog, and Humalog is what you're using. And she ran it without insurance, and she even found a coupon. No, $1,700. So she was really upset. I told her not to worry about it, that we had enough and that we would take care of it. But, when the pharmacist is getting a wake-up call, we certainly can't be the first people to run a price check on insulin in that pharmacy without a coupon. Long story short, too late. We do have insulin at home, and sending insulin through the mail is really not that difficult. I Googled it, and you don't really have to do anything special, except, of course, keep it cool. Depending on where you live, that means different things. It is July in the South, so this is different than sending it, say, in March. But we do keep the styrofoam containers that insulin has arrived in, and some other of my husband's medications come in. So we have styrofoam containers to send it in. It's no big deal. I even threw in some goodies from Friends for Life that I had put aside for Benny, and we sent it to camp. He got it the next day. Not an issue. I'm sharing all this, and I know I'm preaching to the converted, but I think there's this feeling and this thought that, oh, case closed, the insulin pricing problem is all set. It's $35 a month because the insulin company said that's what they're charging. And that is so far from the truth that I think we need to continue to get this message out. It's also making me think how I'm going to send Benny to college with insulin. He's a 6-hour drive away, and he's not planning to come home before Thanksgiving. So I'm not quite sure how much I'm going to send him. I'm not sure how much I trust the little fridge in his dorm room. So this gave me a little bit more to think about, because I was assuming that it would be pretty easy to get a CVS prescription filled. I'm going to have to really kind of have an unpleasant call with my insurer, I think is what it comes down to. But, we're lucky that we have enough to fill in these blanks. All right. As always, thanks to my editor, John Buchanan from Audio Editing Solutions. Thank you so much for listening. I'm Stacey Sims. I'll see you back here soon. Until then, be kind to yourself.
Diabetes Connections is a production of Stacey Sims Media. All rights reserved, all wrongs avenged.
I started drinking AG1 just a couple of months ago, and I really like it. I've never been good at taking vitamins. A couple of years ago, my doctor asked me to start making that part of my habit, and I tried, and I got some vitamin gummies, but this has been a much easier habit to make stick for me. And AG1 replaces your multivitamin, probiotic, and more in one simple, drinkable habit. With just one scoop, I get the nutrients and gut health support that helps my whole body thrive and covers my nutritional basis. My husband drinks it every single morning. He puts it in water and just shakes it up. I really prefer a smoothie. It tastes great. It mixes up super smooth. And I feel good knowing that, I've just taken care of things. It's that easy. If you want to take ownership of your health, it starts with AG1. Try AG1 and get a free 1-year supply of vitamin D and 5 free AG1 travel packs with your first purchase. Go to drinkag1.com/Stacey. That's drinkag1.com/STACEY.